The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, UNU Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Yes, welcome everybody. This is All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I am your host, Rob Rosenthal. I am super happy to be here this evening. I am glad for all of those of you who have tuned in live. Because there's something about live. Live is good. I'm coming to you live right now from New York City, New York. It is the 27th day of November, the night before Thanksgiving. Lovely day here in New York City, New York. If you happen to be contemplating a visit, I'll tell you what, yesterday was 60 degrees. I was floating around Central Park yesterday at 60 degrees. Happy. Glad to have you here. Episode number 69, All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. And let's face it, delicious is good, right? I mean, come on. What's the bad problem with deliciousness? It's all good. Glad you're here. If you're returning, certainly super welcome to you. If you're coming in the first time, we have, I suppose what's unusual is that this podcast runs absolutely live. I mean, we are, and the thing about live that's fun is I can completely screw up. Like, that's the thing. I like the high wire act of it all. You never know what it's going to be. Here we are live, and if you happen not to be listening to us live, then you can certainly hear the podcast on iHeartRadio, All You Can Eat. You can go into your Spotify and look for All You Can Eat, and here we are. Tonight, what we have in store, my friends, is two parts. Part one is going to be about the subject of cruising, by which I mean, getting on a big old ship on the ocean and hanging out on a boat, a giant vessel, for some time. Cruising as a concept, as a vacation. And the reason why is because I am just back Sunday, so 3 days ago, from a long weekend cruise out of Miami to the Bahamas on the Norwegian Cruise Line, NCL for short, Norwegian Cruise Line, ship called the Encore, and it was the inaugural voyage. I mean, so I'm going to tell you about that because that was quite the interesting experience. And for anybody who wants to know what's the deal with cruising, that's why I'm here. I'm going to tell you what the deal is with cruising. Insofar as it relates to that particular cruise, and then some of the few others that I have taken. And part two for this evening should come as no surprise to anyone when you consider that tomorrow is Thanksgiving, our national day of thanks, and the Super Bowl of food. And as All You Can Eat is the podcast about deliciousness, I got plenty of stuff to tell you about food. By the way, if you feel like it, because we're live, and you want to call in with a question about Thanksgiving, about food, about anything related to that, you can. The number here is 800-508-5431. 800, easy for you to remember. 508-5431 if you want to call in. I think that system works. You can certainly give it a try if you would like to. Let us begin this evening with the cruise thing, because I was invited as a member of the media to this weekend's NCL, the inaugural launch of their Encore ship, which we boarded in Miami on Friday, this past Friday, and departed on Sunday. So yeah, I had a full. When did I get on? Maybe did I get on Thursday? I don't want to be confuse this thing. Thursday. Well, it doesn't matter. I slept there for at least 2 nights, so Friday and Saturday night. Right. Okay. Fine. Good. I spent about 48 hours on that ship. Anyway, here's the point of the story. I was invited on as a guest, and I tell you that in the interest of full disclosure. They have no expectations of me. I am under no obligation to report anything other than what I would tell any of my friends who asked me about cruising. What's the deal with that? And so, that's my way of telling you that I didn't have to pay for it. And when you don't have to pay for it, generally speaking, you ought to be pretty happy because they're feeding you and they're drinking you for a couple of days. But that's besides the point. The big picture in cruising is that I don't know. It's strange. Some people love cruising and do it all the time, and others would describe themselves as not cruising type people. And I don't know. I probably spent most of my life thinking that maybe I wasn't a cruise type person. I remember the first time that I went on a cruise. I was in my late teens, early 20s. I wasn't sure that I would ever do it again. It wasn't really for me. It wasn't a great thing. But like an awful lot of time elapsed. And then I got on a couple of cruises to celebrate I don't know, like somebody's, big birthday, like 2 or 3 days on a cruise. And I thought, well, I don't know, that was good. I mean, like I didn't love it. I did not like it. I did it. I thought it wasn't so terrible. And then, finally, I got on a cruise some years ago that sailed. It wasn't really a sail because it was a big old boat. But we cruised kind of like the Mediterranean. You're in a beautiful part of the world, and the cruise itself was not one of those giant ones, but it was a little bit more intimate, and it was so great that I repeated it a couple of times. I mean, so basically, what I'm telling you is that when it comes to cruises, here's my experience. I'm not going to tell you that I'm an expert at this. I've done it a half a dozen times. And the first thing that you have to consider, I suppose, is whether or not you're going to be even remotely uncomfortable with the idea that you're on a boat, that there's motion. But I will say that the larger the boat, the less likely you are to even know that the thing is moving. So I just spent the weekend on the NCL, the Norwegian Cruise Line Encore, and even though we were floating from Miami to the Bahamas, you never really get the sense that you're moving, even though you are. The first thing that you need to know about the cruise line business as a vacation concept is that, like with everything else in life, there are different levels, or what they call in the business, segmentation, right? There's kind of very basic cruises. There's cruises that take out like enormous boats with thousands and thousands of people. There are more intimate cruises. There are luxury cruises. So there are all these different kind of levels of cruising. Right? So if you're on Carnival cruise lines, maybe those are, shorter and more affordable and like they're known just to be, kind of like fun. Maybe you're on Celebrity cruise lines. They try to be a little bit more sophisticated, let's say. Then maybe you go on a Crystal cruise line, a little more elegant, or a Cunard. Literally, you go onto a cruise ship like a Cunard, if that's how they pronounce it. Maybe it's Cunard, but in any case, There's a dress code at dinner every night. Like, they want to keep that thing, special. Disney has a cruise line, so you know what that's going to be like, I suspect. Princess has a cruise line, which is popular with, middle-aged couples and retirees and multi-generational families. Royal Caribbean has some of the biggest ships in the world, and you get on one of these enormous ships, right? And all of a sudden they have rock climbing walls, and they have surfing pools, and they have Broadway shows and ice skating rinks. So what you're beginning to deal with is that you have these resorts on the sea. And in luxury, then there's luxury cruise lines. You're going to pay more. You're going to be on like a Seabourn or a Silver Sea or a Regent Seven Seas or a Viking. These are the names that are associated with your more expensive cruise lines, and so the numbers are smaller, right? There are fewer people on board. There's a little bit more of a privacy. There's more elegance. You're paying for private. You're paying for small. You're paying for intimacy. So one of the things is, if you've gone on cruises before, you kind of understand this, and it's probably not a bad idea in this business. This is one of the unique businesses, whereas when it comes to kind of booking travel these days, a lot of people do their own stuff online, and that's fine. You check out your TripAdvisor and you look at your ratings and you make a couple of bookings online, and you're good. When it comes to cruises, it's not a terrible idea, by the way, to speak to a travel agent that specializes in cruises, because they'll tell you what's what and what may make sense for you and what doesn't. You can go online. The points guy? Anyway, there's an interesting article I read from on the points guy. So I'm sure all you have to do is Google the points guy. But the particular article that I reference here is, which cruise ship cabin category should your family book? So that's a long way around understanding that every cruise line, every cruise company has options for you. And I spent the weekend on a giant vessel, resort-like vessel. It was like Vegas style resort at sea. And it was the Norwegian Encore. And it was exciting because when they do the first time out, the first cruise, the inaugural cruise, it's a special thing. They christen the ship, and there's entertainment. Kelly Clarkson was there performing because she's the godmother of the Norwegian Encore, and it's a special event, honestly, to be on the first ever cruise. This one from Miami through the Bahamas. And I would just tell you up front that the Encore is one of the 10 biggest passenger ships ever built. So this one's not about intimacy. This is about enormity. 3,998 possible guests, right? So this thing can hold, basically, in its 2,040 staterooms, this thing can hold 4,000 passengers. Then you got another, 15, 16, 1,700 in crew working there. The ship itself is 1,094 feet long and runs 20 decks, right? I mean, you're talking about a little city here at sea. It sails from now and through the spring of next year out of Miami, this particular one, the Norwegian Cruise Line Encore. And it'll float around the Caribbean. So you stop, you're a day at sea, then you're going to stop at this port over here, then another one over there, another one over there. And so I will tell you that my experience is, as a guy who is an acknowledged and avowed kind of a variety junkie, I find it inherently interesting to be able to go to a different stop every couple of days. Like, that's just fun for me, conceptually. In the spring of 2020, so let's say, 5 months from now, 6 months, however that works out, The Norwegian Encore docks, instead of Miami, they dock out of New York. And instead of cruising to the Caribbean, they go to they cruise to Bermuda, which also, by the way, I mean, lovely, warm, nice, pleasant, good. The thing about this particular cruise is, there's a lot to like. I mean, the thing that they have done here on a ship that will hold about, up to 4,000 people, they have made it so that there is more than enough for everybody to do and to like. What do I mean? I mean like 29 bars and restaurants on board, more or less. Maybe my number is off by a little bit, but there's a lot of options. There were these features. They have a go-kart racetrack. I mean, but the largest one that you can even consider, like legit with go-karts that run 30 miles. Now you're on a boat, right? You're on a boat. You get into a go-kart and you're on a 1,000-foot track, and with go-karts that are running 30 miles an hour. I mean, it's amazing. And they have a water park and slides on board with pieces of it that are literally extending beyond the width of the boat over the ocean. And they have a massive kind of gaming zone with laser tag. And then there's another area where they have an escape room. And you guys, I don't need to tell you, I don't think. I mean, it's very popular these days, these escape room things. And so, and in addition to all this kind of just this enormity, this incredible variety of things that you can do or your kids can do or whatever, they make available on a ship like this certain more premium packages with more privacy. They have a thing called the Haven Suites, which is more of kind of an upscale and private area that only people who pay for it have access to, where they have their own beach club, right, with your own deck. You have your own bars, your own cabanas, right? So the thing I think that makes the Encore special is that they're basically saying you can come aboard with whoever else you are traveling with, kids, whatever, and everybody can find something that is appealing to them, right? So even for those people that go, well, I'm not sure I want to be on, with a boat with 4,000 people. I mean, you can, if you wanted, you could pay the money and go to their, the Haven, which is their kind of ship within a ship. Right, so it's a little bit more. The staterooms are more lavish. You have suites. You have butler service. Everybody has their own sun deck up there. You have your own restaurant, etc., etc. So it's a more 9 bars and lounges and restaurants. These are actually sitting outside on the ocean. The activities are unbelievable. I mean, again, you're kind of like you're watching the ocean while you're suspended over the side of the ship in the largest racetrack at sea. You can go do your laser tag. You can go into your virtual kind of game area. That's maybe a little advanced for me, but they had a regular game room. Man, I was happy in there. Especially after experiencing some of the bars. The game rooms were good. On board, my friends, some serious entertainment. I mean, like legit. They brought, you guys know the Broadway show Kinky Boots, award-winning kind of fantastic fun show. Well, that's on board the ship because there's a theater that probably holds 1,000 people. And even before the show began, as you walk into the theater, there are people standing there and going, "Hey, here's a glass of wine or a beer." I like that. I mean, like that, you sit down in the theater, you got a glass of wine. Meanwhile, here's the thing: the shows were outstanding. It was as if you were watching a Broadway cast, very professional. I'm talking about Kinky Boots, incredible choreography, great singing and dancing, super well done, very impressive. And on another night, they had a show. It was called, I want to say, Choir of Man. Took place in kind of a pub in Ireland with great music, sing along, interactive. So the theatrical aspect of this cruise, and I'm not a show guy. I mean, I live, I could walk to the theater district from where I live. I don't generally go that much, but the shows on board were great, like excellent. It was fun to sit with them. So you really have to be impressed with this whole thing. In addition to all that, you have a casino, the beer bar that I mentioned. There's like a whole lot of different restaurants to choose from, some of which, come as part of your package. Others of which you might have to pay more for, like specialty restaurants. So you may want to get yourself, for example, if you book one of these things on one of their specialty, restaurant packages. So you go to some of their specialty restaurants if you want to. On board a comedy club. I went to that one night, saw two comedians, one funnier than the next. On board a little club that's kind of like a facsimile of a Brit club with the Beatles began, and they got like a Beatles band playing in there with different music, different Beatles music every night. That was good. You have a spa, you have a gym, you have good food, you have staff that is eager to please. A ton of drinking. I think one of the things that always surprised me about the cruise, I don't know why I should be surprised, but, if I went into the main lobby at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, there were people already sitting at the bar having their Bloody Marys or champagne. Like, they start early. They start early. So that's the thing. A lot of options here. A lot of little pockets aboard the cruise where you could. I am sure. Like, here's the thing. I spent, I'm going to say, 72 hours on board this thing, and I'm sure there were parts of the ship that I have not yet seen. But all in all, if you've gone on a cruise, this one would be worth looking into if you. If you're looking for one of those experiences where you can bring, kind of your, family, and everybody's going to be happy because there's a ton to do on board. And I would say all good. I mean, certainly worth considering a cruise. And in this category, the category is kind of like giant. 4,000 people, enormous boat, a ton to do. Certainly, I can easily recommend the Norwegian Cruise Line Encore because I had fun. There's even a little island, by the way, that they own. So there's a day that you pop over to a little island. Well, it's not a small island, but you can hang on a beach if you want. You can do that. What do they call zip lining there? Have lunch, maybe rent a cabana if you want to do that kind of thing. So anyway, thank you for that, NCL, Norwegian Cruise Lines. That was the Encore, and I'll tell you what, not bad. So, and all you have to do, as I said, is go on to NCL or Norwegian Cruise Lines, take a look at what's available. I know that they have other offerings. I'm sure that they have entries that compete in other segments where it's smaller and more expensive, and that's fine too, whatever it is. And this may be one of those things, as I said to you before, where it's worth actually checking in with your travel agents who specialize in the cruise business. But I'll tell you what, there's something to be said for hanging out on a ship, on the ocean, eating, drinking, being entertained, playing casino, go-karting, it's just, it's all good. So that's the report on this weekend's cruise. Now I think we move right into the turkey business because that's where we're at, my friends. And we begin with this because I don't know how much time that we are going to have to discuss the turkey, but I got the holiday. I mean, I got a ton of things in front of me, but I want to open up with the Butterball Turkey Talk line, which has been going on. Let's see if I have this right. It's going to be something in the 30-something years. How long have they been doing this thing? 38 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a question about your turkey, about your Thanksgiving. How long do I leave it? How do I know? What's this? What's that? And 38 years ago, Butterball, in a stroke of public relations genius, pure genius, came up with the Butterball Turkey Talk line, where operators, about 50 of them, to this day, 38 years later, are standing by for your questions. They get over 11,000 calls, another 3,700 texts, there's 1,000 live chats, hundreds of emails. Your average call with one of the operators standing by, 3 minutes and 9 seconds. Your average hold time, a little bit longer, 4 minutes and 17 seconds. And ladies and gentlemen, when you have a question about your turkey, it's good to know that in real time, you got somebody on the other end of the phone that can help you answer that question. You want to call the Butterball Turkey Talk line, 800-288-8372. You with me? 288-8372. That's the Butterball Turkey hotline, 800-288-8372. You can text them also if you want to do it that way. 844-877-3456. 844-877-3456. That's your Butterball Turkey line. I was reading an article that made me laugh because they get frantic calls, they get funny calls. One of the operators quoted in a recent article said that her favorite call came 5 years ago when a group she suspects was fueled by a few holiday cocktails complained that the 21-pound turkey they had just pulled from the oven had barely any meat. She was puzzled, but then had a moment of what she called a divine inspiration. Quote, "Turn the turkey over," she suggested. They had cooked it breast side down. So, my friends, the turkey Butterball turkey hotline, you get questions answered in real time. Love that. I wrote an article in the Huffington Post. I don't know exactly when, but it was. Now I looked it up and I realized this was published in. Well, it says updated in 2017, but I'm pretty sure I published this thing. In 2010. This article is 9 years old, but I interviewed a number of very kind of prominent, food people, restaurateurs, editors, cookbook authors, wine experts on the subject of Thanksgiving. So if you're so inclined, go to HuffPo. HuffingtonPost.com, and you're looking up Food and Wine All-Stars. It was I interviewed, Dana Cowan, the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine magazine, Danny Meyer, your Uber restaurateur, Anthony Giglio, wine expert, and I asked them. I was like, I said I would ask questions like, give us some advice. Right, so Dana Cowan was the editor of who was the editor of Food and Wine magazine. Said prep most of the meal ahead to avoid having to deal with a hungry, antsy crowd. Okay, so do all your prep up front. Provide ample drinks, alcoholic and not. And I'm not even sure about the not. I think that Thanksgiving is a perfectly good time to be drinking. We'll talk a little bit more about that later because some drinks make more sense than others. 3, give some options for people who hate turkey. Well, that's entirely up to you. Make enough for leftovers and hand out containers so guests can take food home. Okay, good. For cleaning up, let your family help. Let's see, what else did I ask people? Help us pick the wines. We'll get a little bit more into wines later, because the general rule about wine at Thanksgiving is I would say don't sweat it. In fact, I'm looking at an article that was published here in the New York Times. Let me see if I can refer to this right here. Sorry for the crumpling. Now, this article is November 20th. So within the last week, the New York Times publishes an article, and it's like, now comes the easy part, in which Eric Asimov, the expert over there at the New York Times on the subject of wine, the easy part is choosing the wine. And I would say that without reading through the specifics, without taking you through the specifics of the article, his basic intention is, don't sweat it. Get some decent whites, get some decent reds. And when I say decent, I mean most of the wines that he recommended are in that $15 to $20 range. Don't sweat the wine selection. You can keep it light. If you on the red side, if you're going with like Pinot Noir, that's kind of on the light one. Certainly good as a dinner choice. You can go bigger, like a Zinfandel, which is bolder and bigger and richer. On the white side, I have to say I'm always a fan of the Pinot Gris, which I think goes well with all food. But long story short, it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, that's really what it is that we're talking about here, is get whatever drinkable stuff you have and enjoy. You don't have to sweat on this holiday over what's perfect, what matches, what's good, what isn't. I don't think most people have a clue anyway. I mean, if you want, pop open your bottle of red wine, stick it in a decanter and serve it in a decanter and tell people that, you decanted it and it's aerating, and all of a sudden it creates the illusion of it being, kind of great. Let's see, what else did I ask these people? What's the most popular turkey recipe from Food and Wine magazine? Dana Cowan, it's bacon roasted turkey with a sweet onion gravy. And you want to look that one up? You go to bonappetit.com, right? And you go bacon roasted turkey with sweet onion gravy if you're still not sure. What about a cocktail before the meal? Now, here's the thing about cocktails. There's been a lot about this lately. I'm a believer and I'm a fan, but one of the ways that you approach cocktails in this particular occasion, especially when you're dealing with a crowd, is you make pitcher drinks. Right? You have a whole pitcher of cocktails, and then you don't have to be making individual cocktails when everybody starts showing up for the event. So Anthony Gillia, wine expert, I said, what's the cocktail that we should put together? And he gave me a cocktail called the Flying Grandma, which I thought was super appropriate. And it had citrus vodka and Grand Marnier and grapefruit juice and maybe some mint. And then, he kind of topped it off with a chilled sparkling kind of a Moscato, meaning like a sparkling thing. The point is, whatever it is, whatever drink it is that you like, you make kind of a bunch of them. So that way you don't have to be making individual cocktails as people come in. Let's see, what else did I ask? I asked people like Gary Vaynerchuk, if you had 5 people at your Thanksgiving meal, who would they be? He came up with some very interesting things. Notorious Big, etc., etc. Vince McMahon, I think you guys know him from the wrestling. What's the best tasting dish? I asked some of the chefs to make. Best tasting, most taste, fewest ingredients, least effort. Brussels sprouts came up. If you cook Brussels sprouts really well in the oven with a little duck fat, some onion, and some garlic, don't forget the salt. Boom, baby. I asked a wine expert, what do we do? My stomach is hurting already just from the conversation here. What digestive would you recommend? And my friend Anthony said he's a big fan of Amaro, which is an Italian bitter. Comes in multiple kind of brands, and I'm going to tell you something, or a grappa, and these things actually will help you digest. I mean, they may or may not give you an extra buzz. I haven't figured that part out yet. But after a big old rich meal, These things, these amaros, these bitters, these digestives, these grappas have the capacity to help you actually digest all that heaviness. What do you do with leftovers? I thought my chef friend Chris Lee came up with the best thing for leftovers, because I know everybody throws all their stuff on a sandwich. Said turkey pot pie. He takes all the leftovers, mashed potatoes, cranberry chutney, stuffing, broccoli, turkey, gravy, and he puts it in a pie tin, and then he covers it with some kind of, crusty pie dough. That sounds like a good leftover. I also saw a fantastic recipe today online for doing like turkey nachos. Hello, I'm good for that. On a completely different, well, not completely different because it is Thanksgiving. New York Times has run an article also over the last week in the food section entitled "Celery is Ready for a Starring Role." Long relegated to the stock pot and the crudité tray, this versatile vegetable is Thanksgiving's unsung hero and deserves a special spot on your menu. All right, look, I read something like that and I can't help it because, celery to me, is a zero. It's a bore. The only time I find myself really using celery is in what the French would call your mirepoix. Every culture has its own kind of flavoring, its own base for their cooking. And in French cooking, it's the mirepoix, which is a combination of celery, carrot, and onion. The only other time I could think of really using celery in any meaningful way is if you're having it in like sticks, not even in crudité, because why bother, right? I don't understand celery. But when you're having buffalo chicken wings, sure, there's those celery things on the side. Or you're having that great Bloody Mary that has a long stalk of celery in it. And then I could totally understand it. But other than that, who wants to eat celery? It just seems like chewy and stringy and watery. I'm not interested. But anyway, here's an entire article devoted to the fact that it's not only Thanksgiving's unsung hero, but it deserves a place on your menu. What are we going to say about celery? Here's what I'm going to say: that if you were making, so there are a couple of ingredients here. Crunchy celery that's partnered with blue cheese in a salad, fine. Heat subdues celery's vegetal flavor, so they're basically saying when you make a potato leek soup, which I make, celery in the thing is a beautiful thing. But the one kind of dish on this whole celery article is the one that's braised with white wine, stock, and herbes de Provence, right? Because when you braise something, which is to say cooking it kind of in liquid, it gets soft, it gets sweet, and it becomes, the texture becomes silky. So that actually looks good to me. Like braising, celery in white wine, chicken stock or vegetable stock, herbes de Provence, and that actually looks good in all ways. So anyway, that's the little chit chat about celery. Let's see what else on the subject of Thanksgiving. Bear with me here because I'm going to move around. I'm going to move over right now to since we're talking about celery, I want to talk about vegetables in general. One of the things that you can do for your Thanksgiving is roast just about any vegetable, right? It requires nothing more than some oil and some salt and some pepper and just, some time in the oven and it breaks and it gets soft and it gets sweet because it caramelizes. So it's a good time to roast veg. And here I have in front of me, and again, this is from New York Times, how to roast about any vegetable. And so here's a list of, 15 maybe vegetables. cut into half-inch chunks generally. And then at 400 degrees, how long it would take to roast. So if you were roasting whole asparagus, it might take, 8 to 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of the asparagus. And again, with all of these, I drizzle, some olive oil on the veg, maybe on the pan, hit them up with some salt, maybe some pepper, throw them in a 400-degree oven, and you have deliciousness. When they come out, whether it's the asparagus or any of these other vegetables, if you want to squeeze lemon on, great idea. If you want to zest the lemon on them, lovely. If you want to grate some Parmesan cheese, terrific, right? Whether it's asparagus, and then they have beets. Beets are going to take 25 to 40 minutes. But boy, when those things roast up, they get some crazy sweet. You roast beets, put them in your salad with some little chunks of goat cheese and a sprightly vinaigrette. That makes me feel good. Roast broccoli, 10-15 minutes. Brussels sprouts, 20 to 30 minutes. And as I said, it was the chef Bill Telepan who said when you're roasting Brussels sprouts and you have some garlic and you have some onion, you roast them in some duck fat, man, that's heavenly eating any night of the year. Butternut or winter squash, 25-40 minutes. Cauliflower, 25 to 45 minutes. Roast cauliflower is fantastic. It just is. It just goes from being nothing, cardboard, into delicious, sweet, soft, caramelized. Doesn't need a whole lot else. It's just good. Cherry tomatoes. Chickpeas. I roast chickpeas all the time. I actually put them in the toaster oven. Drain a can of chickpeas, rinse them up so you get that gook off them. Hit them up with some oil, hit them up with some salt, hit them up with some pepper. I like using, Spanish flavoring if I have, like a Spanish paprika, pimenton, ancho chili powder. Trader Joe's sells that chili lime seasoning. That's great on chickpeas. They go in the toaster oven for 7 minutes. If you have them on toast, or maybe 10 minutes, if you put them on 350, 400 in the oven function, and they come out, and not only are they delicious, but the texture is fantastic. A little bit of a crunch or a chew on the outside, softness on the inside, fantastic. As appetizers, lovely as a side dish. That's chickpeas. You can do eggplant. You can roast leeks. You can do peppers. You can roast. I think everybody knows you can roast potatoes. Again, that's a 25 to 35 minute job if you cut them into these half-inch chunks. Sweet potatoes, great. Zucchini, summer squash. Roasting vegetables is the answer in general. You're always going to get something good out of that. And it's easy to amplify with your herbs, your spices, with your shavings, whether it be zest or Parmesan or just plain old salt and a good glug of olive oil. I was sent some advice on how to make a proper cheese plate for the holidays. I thought it was worth, look, even though it's kind of a PR thing from the Jarlsberg people, and that's fine, because there's nothing wrong with Jarlsberg. It's funny, Jarlsberg is kind of like the Norwegian cruise line of cheese. Like, it's a big old hunk of cheese, but pretty much everybody, thinks it's plenty good. Get yourself a cheese board. I actually don't think I have a cheese board, so I use a cutting board. I have a wooden cutting board. I put cheese on it. So you begin by arranging your cheese plate with a wedge and some cut up cubes of your cheese. Step 2, add something salty and sweet, right? It goes with cheese in general, and you should probably use more than one. Jarlsberg is fine, but maybe you put something softer on your cheese plate if you're making a cheese plate. What's softer, like a brie or a camembert or something that's like a semi-soft? Maybe you have a goat cheese on there. Maybe you have something hard on there, like a cheddar, like a something that what's the other one that I love? Gruyere. You know what I mean? You can put more than one cheese on the thing on your plate, but make sure you also have something salty on there as well. Would be fun. What is salty, right? Maybe it's salami. Maybe it's little chunks of salami. Maybe it's some olives. right? And then you're going to want something sweet. Now, what's the something sweet? You could put some raspberries, you could put some figs, dried apricots, sliced apples. So you have, basically you're starting to, I don't think that you should fill up before Thanksgiving. But I'll tell you what, a little bit of a taste of things that will stimulate your palate. Salt, sweet, tart. These are things that are great for your palate. Step 3, add some crunch. What's in the crunch? It can be crackers. It can be roasted walnuts, right? So these kind of things are good. It could be a little toasty piece of baguette. Step 4, decorate. In other words, can I make that cheese plate look a little sexier? Sure, garnish it with some stuff, right? A couple of pieces of star anise, maybe some cinnamon sticks, maybe a couple of leaves of rosemary or leaves of sage. And then 5, finally, when you have sweet and you have salty and you have crunchy and you have cheesy, it's great if you can offer up a little something exciting to drink. And what is exciting to drink? Crack open a bottle of champagne, fill somebody a glass of bourbon, or simply a white or red wine. All good. All good. I literally just finished dinner, and I'm already starting to feel hungry. I'm going to skip now, just because I'm in this weird order of things. Oh, I love the Thanksgiving. But here's one for you. I thought that people should know, because I think Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken, is the heaviest travel day of the year. I saw some silly number today. I don't know, it's like 50 million people getting on planes. Don't hold me to the number. We just know that it's the number one busiest travel day at the airports. And there's a report, and who's the report issued by? Insure My Trip. Thanksgiving travel report. The least stressful U.S. airports. Well, it's a list of the 75 airports in this country measured on the basis of stress, like how stressful they are. Take a guess, ladies and germs. Where is the least stressful airport in these United States of America? I'll give you a couple seconds to consider. The least stressful airport this Thanksgiving, based on flight cancellations and all the other factors that they put into this report, and the answer is Honolulu, Hawaii. And the one that follows that at number 2, Hilo, Kahului, Hilo, Hawaii, Salt Lake City, and Atlanta. So these are all good. And then when you start to get into, well, it's not so stressful. It is literally the most stressful airport in the United States in terms of how you're going to get to make sure that you make your plane. Chicago, ladies and gentlemen, Chicago, Illinois, both O'Hare as well as Midway. Houston is stressful, Newark, New Jersey, Burbank, California. And I guess the one that surprised me was Buffalo, New York. Dallas is a little bit busy, and it takes a while before you get to New York's LaGuardia, which is kind of the definition of stress. But let's give credit where it's due. They're doing whatever kind of work that they can do at LaGuardia Airport to make it a better airport. It's in the middle of an enormous renovation, which makes it even more stressful to fly with. Now, I have been traveling professionally now for more years than I want to say. So let's say 30 just for fun. This year alone, so far, I have been to 11 countries. I'll be in 3 more before the year is up. I travel. How many times in my lifetime have I purchased travel insurance? 3, 2, 1. 0. I've never purchased travel insurance in my life. I'm not saying I'm not placing a judgment on it. I just didn't think that it was right. And yet, what an interesting concept as a holiday present for your friends or yourself who travel with such frequency that you can buy a travel insurance package from Allianz. That's the company, Allianz. And that seems like a surprisingly different kind of present. You know, you drop like $100, $150, you hand somebody a certificate, and it's basically all of your travel for the next year is insured. So if you miss a flight or if you have to cancel a flight or whatever, you get completely reimbursed. 135, I don't know, 150 bucks. So, but you can buy your friends and loved ones a gift for about $1.50 if you want to insure, if they're big travelers, and it makes sense, you want to insure all their travel for the forthcoming year. Allianz, Allianz. I found online also today, because I'm on the incoming for anything having to do with food, beverages, travel, and this time of year you get a lot of Thanksgiving stuff, and it turns out that there's a thing called the Dranksgiving Bingo Extravaganza. So it's a bingo game that's a drinking game where everybody gets you get a board. I don't know if everybody gets a board. I can't claim to know that I know how the game is played, but I thought it was worth sharing with you some of the things that get you bingo boxes filled up, so you can eventually yell bingo. And of course, the box in the middle is free. But let me tell you what some of the other things are that you can cover off at this coming Thanksgiving. And then, if I can, I'll tell you where to find it. And I'm not sure that I can. Okay, but you can look up Dranksgiving Bingo Extravaganza. Number one, when you have to explain to your grandma for the 1,000th time what you do for a living, you have that box is yours. Two, someone brings a tasteless vegan version of your favorite classic dish. Yeah, that vegan stuffing, I'm sure, is lovely. I like mine that has the sausage and the chorizo in it. Number three, you secretly undo the top button of your pants. I cannot begin to tell you how many times. That would be the first box that I check off from mine. Eventually, after a good Thanksgiving, I will find myself in complete recline on the floor, asking somebody else to bring me the grappa, if you will. Number four, you get assigned to the kids' table. Oh, that's always humiliating, isn't it? Number six, you already took an Instagram of your dinner plate, so check that one off for all of those of you who are sending out photos of your meal. Number seven, your uncle says something that makes the entire room cringe. I mean, I guess everybody's going to check that one off. Your judgy relative asks why you're still single. And finally, someone is wearing a turkey hat. WTF. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a holiday where we're supposed to express gratitude, aren't we? I mean, and it would be shameful not to take advantage of the fact that it's the one day of the entire course of the year where the celebration is about feeling grateful. I would argue that how great would it be if you could feel grateful with a little bit more regularity, but at minimum at Thanksgiving. You want to spend the time to think about those things in your life that are good. Your friends, your family, your work, your home, your vacation, what you're eating. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons to feel good about something. And you try to do it on Thanksgiving, but there's a point of view that says it's misplaced. You should be feeling some gratitude if you can every day of your life. I don't know who can. I don't know if everybody can or they can't. What I did pick up somewhere, and I always thought that it was interesting, was this quote, that it's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. Are you with me on that? I don't mean to be too deep or esoteric, but it's not happiness that makes us grateful. Rather, it is gratefulness that makes us happy. I am happy and grateful to have the opportunity to do the weekly podcast here at All You Can Eat, which shows up generally live on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. And if you don't happen to catch it here live, you can certainly go into your iHeart radio and go and look up All You Can Eat podcast or my name, Rob Rosenthal. You can now do that very same thing in Spotify, where you go into the search function and you go and you search podcast for All You Can Eat, and here I am. Up now, we have 69 episodes of this to hear if you would like. Me, Rob Rosenthal, you can find. If you were an Instagram person, I'm Real Rob Rosenthal. If you're a Twitter person, I am Short Order Dad, also available to you on the Facebook. And I will have you know that there's a book that I have written, I think I want to say 3 years ago. Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. I think there are currently 4 copies, 5, 6 copies, or half a dozen copies left on Amazon. The concept of the book is simple. Get the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. I explain basically how to cook to achieve deliciousness in the kitchen with that formula. That's going to be available to you on Amazon and some other places. Shorter Debt, and it makes, by the way, for a whole lot less than $10, it makes a pretty damn good present to anybody who is interested in improving their cooking in the kitchen. With that, my friends, episode 69 comes to a close. I am your host, Rob Rosenthal. This is All You Can Eat, the podcast about deliciousness. I hope you have a glorious and happy and grateful Thanksgiving this year and many more to come. Until next week, remember, my friends, life is short, so never waste a meal.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on